Have you ever wondered if Yahweh was only known to Israel, or could it be that his name, his presence, and his worship reached people long before the nation of Israel even existed? Think about it. Before Moses stood on Mount Sinai, before the tablets of the Ten Commandments were ever etched in stone, even before Jacob became Israel, there were whispers of Yahweh. So who were these ancient people who knew his name? How did they come to worship the God we now associate with Israel? And what does this tell us about God's bigger plan for humanity, a plan that stretches beyond borders, nations, and timelines? This is the mystery of the worship of Yahweh before Israel. Trust me, what you're about to discover might change how you see the Bible forever. So before we dive in, go ahead and hit like, subscribe, and drop your thoughts in the comments. We love hearing from you, and your questions just might shape a future video. Let's explore this mystery together. Alright, let's start at the heart of it all. Who is Yahweh? You might remember the powerful moment in Exodus where Moses stands before the burning bush, trembling, unsure, and full of questions. He asks something so human, "What is your name?" And God answers with a phrase that still sends chills down the spine. "I am who I am." Exodus 3:14. It's deep, eternal, unshakable. Then, in the very next verse, God tells Moses, "Say this to the people of Israel, Yahweh, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you." Exodus 3:15. Now pause right there. Did you catch that? The God of your ancestors, meaning this wasn't the first time people had heard of Yahweh. The name Yahweh, rooted in the Hebrew verb vmr, means more than just a label. It speaks of existence itself, of a God who was, who is, and who will always be. But here's where things get really interesting. This name, Yahweh, didn't originate at the burning bush. In fact, people already knew it before Moses even stepped foot on holy ground. Shocked? You're not alone. Let's go back, way back, and see where this divine name shows up in the most unexpected places. So if Moses wasn't the first to hear the name Yahweh, who was? Let's rewind the biblical timeline all the way back to Genesis. Did you know that the name Yahweh is mentioned in Genesis 4:26? That's long before Abraham, before Isaac, before Jacob. At that time, people began to call upon the name of the Lord, Genesis 4:26. That word Lord in Hebrew is E-H-E-H, Yahweh. Wait a minute, this was during the days of Enosh, the grandson of Adam. Think about it. Just a few generations after creation, people were already calling on the name of Yahweh. So here's the big question. How did they know his name? Who taught them to call on Yahweh? Could it be that God was revealing himself even then to those who truly sought him? Let's look at Genesis 12 verse 8. When Abraham arrives in Canaan, he builds an altar to the Lord and calls upon the name of the Lord. Genesis 12 verse 8. Again, Yahweh. Abraham wasn't just encountering a new deity. He was calling on a known name, a name already familiar to his family line. So this raises a stunning possibility. Could the worship of Yahweh have been passed down even through corrupted generations? Could faithful individuals have held on to his name even while the world turned to idols? This opens up a powerful truth. God was never absent. He was always reaching, always calling, and there were always people who responded to that call, even before Israel existed. Let's dig deeper, because there's more. Now let's talk about someone mysterious, someone who shows up out of nowhere in Genesis 14 and then disappears just as quickly. Have you ever heard of Melchizedek? Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was priest of God Most High. Genesis 14:18. Wait, hold up. A priest of God Most High before Moses, before the law, before the Levitical priesthood? Yes. Melchizedek was already serving Yahweh, and get this, Abraham recognized it. Melchizedek blessed Abram, saying, "Blessed be Abram by God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, and praise be to God Most High who delivered your enemies into your hand." Then Abram gave him a tenth of everything, Genesis 14:19-20. That's right, Abraham tithed to this mysterious priest. So here's the big question. Where did Melchizedek come from? Who taught him about Yahweh, the Most High God? The Bible doesn't say he was part of Abraham's family. He wasn't from Israel, yet he was clearly a true worshipper of Yahweh. Hebrews 7 adds even more mystery, saying, Melchizedek is without father or mother, without genealogy, without beginning of days or end of life. Hebrews 7:03. Some scholars even suggest he may have been a Christ-like figure, a foreshadowing of Jesus himself. But here's what we can know for sure. Melchizedek proves that the worship of Yahweh was alive and active, even outside of Abraham's household. Isn't that amazing? This shows us that God wasn't working only through Israel. He was already planting seeds of truth across the world through priests, kings, and worshippers who knew his name. Let's look at a few more examples because Melchizedek isn't the only one. Now, here's another surprising figure who knew and honored Yahweh, Jethro, the priest of Midian. Sound familiar? He's the father-in-law of Moses, but he wasn't an Israelite. He lived in the land of Midian, and yet listen to how Scripture describes him. Now, Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. Exodus 3:01. A priest, yes, but not of a false god. Jethro was a priest of the true God. Even before Moses received the law, when Jethro visits Moses in the wilderness after the exodus from Egypt, look at what happens. Jethro rejoiced for all the good that the Lord had done to Israel, and Jethro said, "Blessed be the Lord Yahweh who has delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that Yahweh is greater than all gods." Exodus 18:9-11. Hold on. He uses the name Yahweh. Not only does he recognize Yahweh, he worships him and even offers sacrifices. Then Jethro brought a burnt offering and sacrifices to God, and Aaron came with all the elders of Israel to eat a meal with Jethro before God. Exodus 18:12. This is huge. Jethro, a non-Israelite priest, was already connected to Yahweh, and he wasn't rebuked or corrected. Instead, he was welcomed into fellowship with Israel's leaders. So what does this tell us? It tells us that God was already moving outside the borders of Israel. He was already known, already worshipped, already revealing himself to seekers in distant lands. It wasn't about ethnicity or nationality. It was about the heart that sought the truth. Jethro is a powerful reminder that Yahweh's reach was never limited to one nation. His story shows us that the worship of the one true God was spreading quietly, like light in the darkness. But believe it or not, there's even more evidence. Let's keep going. Now here's a mind-blowing thought. What if one of the oldest books in the Bible, possibly written before Moses, reveals deep truths about Yahweh, even though the main character isn't even an Israelite? Enter Job. Job wasn't from Israel. He lived in the land of a region far from Canaan, and yet the entire book is centered around his relationship with God. Let's look at how Job talks about him. The Lord gave and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Job 1:21. Yup, that's Yahweh. Again, the Hebrew behind Lord is YHWH, the sacred name of God. And throughout the book, Job refers to God not just as a distant deity, but as a personal, righteous and sovereign Lord. He longs to speak with him, plead his case, and even declares in faith, "I know that my Redeemer lives, and that in the end he will stand on the earth." Job 19:25. That's powerful. So what does this tell us? Job had a real, intimate knowledge of God, not as a tribal deity, not as one God among many, but as the living Redeemer. And here's the kicker. Job's friends, though flawed, also spoke of God. They wrestled with moral and spiritual questions just like the rest of us today. This means the knowledge of Yahweh, of a righteous personal creator, wasn't isolated to Israel. It was known, debated, and worshipped by people from all over the ancient world. And that shouldn't surprise us. After all, God created all people, not just one nation. Romans 1:19-20 echoes this truth. For what can be known about God is plain to them, for his invisible attributes have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world. The fingerprints of Yahweh are everywhere. So whether we're looking at Job, Melchizedek, Jethro, or Abraham, we see the same thing. God was revealing himself and people were responding. But now let's bring it home and explore why this matters for you and me today. Now, here's a figure who truly challenges our expectations: Balaam. He's one of the most puzzling characters in the Bible, a man outside of Israel with questionable motives, and yet somehow he's able to hear directly from Yahweh. Let's take a closer look. And God came to Balaam and said, "Who are these men with you?" Even Balaam, a non-Israelite prophet, had direct access to the voice of Yahweh. What does this tell us? God isn't confined to one nation or people. He will speak to anyone who is willing to listen. So what's the lesson for us? God has always been calling out, always been revealing himself to anyone who is seeking the truth. The worship of Yahweh didn't begin with Israel. It was already happening in places far beyond the borders of that nation. This reveals God's heart. He doesn't want anyone to be left out. He's always been reaching, always been calling, always been showing himself to anyone who is willing to listen. And that, my friend, is the beauty of the gospel. It's for everyone. Jew and Gentile, rich and poor, near and far. Yahweh's love, his presence, his truth. It's never been confined to one group. It's for all who seek, all who call on his name. If you found this video interesting, don't forget to like, share, and comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts and dive deeper into these mysteries with you. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on Bible Mysteries Unveiled.